A box gathering. Connection.
Okay, welcome to the box gathering. This is another campfire. Today, we're really excited to have Mark Bennett from PDS Systems on the campfire talking to him today, / interrogating him today. So welcome to the campfire, Mark Bennett. Are you well?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And thanks for the invite.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So just doing a bit of a around the table. So my colleague, Ivan Cobb, is with us today. We've also got Scott Sivwright, who's over in the States in Milwaukee, who is an MMA coach and very much diving into the ecological dynamic sides of things. We have John Wise. He is the head, is that the right, head of DICE at the moment at Loughborough College? Is that what you're...
I'll take that, yeah.
You'll take that. Yeah, that's what you're getting.
Promotion.
I was going to say janitor, but you'll take that. Okay, and we've also got the lead performance coach for the British Army, Ben Stewart. How are you, Ben? You well?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, so that is the, can we call it a panel, Ivan? Can we say panel?
I'll do.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a full house. Okay. So, so Mark, former British Commando physical training instructor and now founder of your own company, Performance Development Systems. Would you like to give us a bit of an introduction to those people, the few people who don't know who you are?
Yeah, well, the short version is, if you haven't listened to any of the many podcasts that are popping up now, is I joined the military in '83 thinking everyone would be highly fit and motivated, and I realised most weren't. They were quite lazy gits, many, but they had that fit group. So I went down to the commando course and did my basic physical training instructors course, but there was a journey sort of early 90s when coming back from just serving operationals with the commando forces and got promoted into a recruit training centre as a corporal PTI. And there was some of those life-changing moments where I thought I was a great instructor because I was winning all the competitions. But then I started to reflect that actually some of the platoons that were passing out that I was developing had smaller numbers than some of the others. So I started to realise early 90s that actually I wasn't that good, and we weren't good in the military at the time, and actually influencing the people that didn't have the mental robustness or couldn't manage their state or couldn't cope with adversity and couldn't make great decisions. I have the discipline to do things unsupervised or when you're tired or when things aren't going well. So I went on a road of discovery then, and you can imagine early 90s before internet, and I was winning competitions, and I lost a couple because I was attempting things that just to try and develop the other recruits. And it took a long time, no support, lots of people knocking me. As you can imagine, you're getting soft mark, etc., etc. But I started to get the results again. And it took another 6 years or so before I go, yeah, I really know what I'm doing. But if anyone came to ask me, I just really couldn't understand to explain it well enough. And then late 90s, I started to work with, you may know Mike Ford. He was older rugby league player, coach at the time, gone on to play, obviously, coach England and Bath Rugby, and with working with him, and then I started to work with Warrington Wolves, and I was working with Saracens, Sale Sharks at the time. I was getting some real impact with the teams, but what was happening was when the teams were going back into the normal organisation, it was all regressing. So then my next light bulb came off, says this is absolutely useless if they need me to be there to have the influence. I realised I had to upskill the coaches, but upskill them in a way that actually when I wasn't there, they'd have the awareness and the ability and the tools to know how to make the right interventions to develop the type of behaviours we want in those players. So that took another 6 years. And now obviously it's 30 years in, and it's now with me, I challenge myself more than anyone, but it's been 30 sports now. Going into schools, inner city schools in England and in America, all the way through to pro teams from numerous sports. So it's, yeah, it works where there's people. It's just now, it's got to a point now where I'm not good at the marketing side, but I'm very good at actually the interventions, full interventions, but also working with individual coaches. But the real sweet spot is when you work with an organization with all the coaches, so they can actually impart the common language, the common terminology to actually impact the behaviors of the athletes from 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, all the way up to their senior level. So although their coaching style in technical and tactical may change, there won't be a trip-up conflict with the athlete as they go through the journey. they'll understand, they'll have more awareness, emotional intelligence, they'll be able to self-evaluate live, make great decisions without fear. All those principles we can develop in young kids will help them. And my experience is we've managed, the people who have done it have managed to keep the right athletes in the sport for longer, because a lot of the great athletes, I feel, we lose early on because they come disengaged, bored, because they're told what to do too often by many of the coaches.
And one of your, I don't know if the word is taglines, but performance is a behaviour, not an outcome, is one of your, forgive me if the word, choose the word tagline, but what do you mean by that? So performance is a behaviour, not an outcome.
Yeah, so it comes to the challenges, especially when I've worked at the elite level of sport, is the first back knock to this type principle is, well, Mark, we need to get results. It's all about the results. My job is on the line based on the results. So it's a way of understanding, well, where do results come from? We can't guarantee results. It's impossible. There's too many variables. If we're in a competition against somebody else, what can we do? We can maximize our performance. Where does performance come from? We'll take away the physicality of the ability of the individual physically and their technical, tactical upskilling from the coach. It boils down to, in that moment, that athlete being present, making the right choice based on what they see in front of them and execute it with intent, without fear, and can adapt live. It's those processes. And we backtrack to that. What allows someone to do that is being in the right state, scanning well, and having the confidence in those moments, whether it's where we talk about the reactive, the proactive, the anticipation, whatever it is, they have the ability to do that. And that all stems from the behaviors. So if we look at it, what some coaches don't do is first of all say, hang on, how consistent are my behaviors in practice and in pre-season and in competition for me to be effective in my state, to be able to actually scan effectively and make effectively interventions in the right way to get the best out of my athlete, wherever that may be. And also, how do I identify the trends of the behaviors in the athletes in practice when no one's watching, when they are in competition, that's going to help them make great choices and execute them and adapt live without waiting for me to tell them what to do under pressure, what I call the rubbernecking. So when we're looking at performance as a behavior, not an outcome, what we're saying is, let's spend more time identifying the sources that impact performance that can facilitate results. And that's based on knowing what to look for in behaviors and how I can influence them, one in myself, but secondly within the athlete.
So let's look at bringing that into boxing now. So we had a chat, it's probably about 1.5 years, 2 years ago at one of your master classes. I think it was down in Kent. And we talked about boxing. I asked you sort of how you thought your principles would apply in boxing. And one of the things that you said to me is that it's very autocratic, and it's very much the boxer does what they're told all the time, and there's very much thinking allowed to go, especially in that performance environment when it's in the corner and the coach is shouting 1,000 different things. How would PDS sort of fit into maybe addressing some of them issues, shall we say?
Yeah, so if you look at it, it's one of those, the Stephen Covey statement, begin with the end in mind. So it's identifying what type of athlete you want. So if we look at boxing, we want not between rounds an athlete waiting for the coach to tell them, well, you need to be aware of his jab coming up or your guard's dropping, be aware of this, whatever it may be. We need the athlete to read what's in front of them and know how to adapt based on live, on trends and what they're seeing, and have the confidence to adapt, have the skills to, but the awareness to know what the choice and to adapt. So here's the challenge. If we're getting, now there's two big things to that, is if we're getting them under pressure in the corner, they're sitting down, their head could be all over the place anyway. So we're questioning then how much is actually going in and how much are they not in, how much of it is too late already. So how much is the other corner actually saying something else that could counteract what you're saying now anyway? It's in the past. So there's two things there that I see as negatives. If we're saying, well, what if we could develop in practice athletes, and I'm sure there's coaches out there that are doing elements of this. Don't know how consciously and don't know how they're developing. But if we can get an athlete to go, right, it's up to you now, and I'm scanning as a coach, right, what are you seeing now? I'm even taking the opposition away and saying, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to feint here and see if you can catch him on that left hook, that guard drop, and see what you can do for me. Not telling your boxer, and then you're scanning to see, right, now that athlete's deliberately adjusted. Can I see my athlete spotting it quick enough and making that adaptation live? So then when they come in, now there's many interventions we can go into where would shuffle that and influence that. But when they come in and sit down on the break, the first thing I want to do is, okay, review. I don't tell them anything. What I'm hearing from them is, right, this is what I saw. Okay, this is what I jacked it. Didn't work. Not sure. I tried this, or I haven't got the ability to hit this, but I'm spotting this, and this is how I attempted to hit it. This is how I attempted to change. I'm happy with this. I need to be mindful of this next time. Or coach, I haven't got a clue what I've tried this is not working. I don't know. So now we're going, right, now I'm listening. Two things are happening. I've already scanned. So I'm going, this is what I've seen. Now I'm hearing it from the athlete. Now I'm connecting. Am I internally agreeing? Yep. Or actually, no, what you're saying is wrong, or you're missing stuff because of the scanning. Then I can put in my intervention. So it might be, I'm hearing what I'm happy with, and you might end up with, okay, so what if he does this? And now he's got to go, well, I need to be ready for this. Great. What about this? Great. And now you can add your little bit if you want. But then you finish with, okay, so what are you going to do? So the last bit is them saying, right, I'm going to do this. Not I'm trying to do, I'm not sure. So that prevents them from just switching off, daydreaming and just nodding, because actually it's them engaged. Now, here's the reality, and it linked into badminton, Adam, years ago when I was working with them in Milton Keynes, and their head of performance said to me, in badminton, if you don't know, they have halfway through the match, when they get to a certain amount of points, they have a timeout where the athlete speaks to the coach. That's part of the international process. And when I was watching them in international, the athlete, you could tell if they weren't playing well, their head was just down and the coach was just giving them something. The coach was not in charge of their state. They were not aware of how I impacted the athlete, and the athlete said nothing. And then they went back out again. So I was suggesting to this head of performance, look, this is going to be a lot better for the athlete if you can get them to self-reflect live, but then be able to quantify that to the coach, and the coach can listen to see what the athlete thought and why did they make those decisions, and then they can add a bit. And the performance director said, Mark, there's no way our athletes could do that. So now I'm a bit shocked him saying that. So the problem is now that coach, or as head of performance, is saying, well, I've seen this, they're not capable of doing anything else. Because if the coach in that moment asks them and go, right, review that, you just get a blank face. So the reality is we need to do it in practice. One, they need to see the value, and we need to be consistent in practice. Then we load the pressure, as opposed to just going, well, I'll just, in a match at some point, I'll just go review it around and hope magic happens. So part of it is not our awareness of our state, but secondly is surely we want to get an athlete, one, to be able to quantify what they did, but we want to know what they thought and why they did those things before we provide the intervention. So if they miss stuff, we could add. And then we always want to go, well, okay, so what are you going to do now? So we can see, are they going to tell us, the doer, the actor, the person that's going to do it, can they tell us, right, I'm doing this? Very simple, very short. So for me, that would be my big transition from, let's call it traditional in the corners, compared with developing athletes that are a lot more aware of what they're doing and why they did it live, and then can quantify that so the coach can listen, then add anything if they're missing any gaps, or they're missing something, or they're incorrect, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. And one of the tools that I know you use is the rule of three.
Yeah.
So as a tradition, and as you've mentioned, we're very much coach intervention. This is what you're doing wrong, very reductionist. And here's your strategy to put it right now, follow what I'm doing. So your strategy of the rule of three, if you can just tell us a little bit about that, turns that on its head.
Yeah, so it's always, if you think about it, the process of, if I went through the action review process first, Adam, and then it links into the rule of three. So the action review process, and I'll do a general one, and then I may well challenge you guys how you would adjust that based on your sport. But in essence, I get the coach to do this. I evaluate this with the coach, the same as the coach needs to do with the athlete. So first of all, I'm scanning athlete state. So what's their state like? That's the source of everything. So if their state's wrong, my intervention's got to be there. So I'm scanning for it, I've got to tick yes. Now I'm looking for, what I want the athlete to do is scan, data capture. So I'm in the present, and what am I picking up? What am I seeing? Bang, 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 bang. And then from that data comes choices. And then from that choices comes, we call the variables. So they're the trends where we're identifying strengths and weaknesses of that opposition. Well, this wouldn't work, this wouldn't work. Well, these are the options. And they're just committing to them, but then live in their head, they can review the choice and the execution. Right, nailing execution, my execution's awesome, wrong choice, I'm adapting next, it's this. Or choice is good, not executing it well, right, same choice, I'm executing. So we work through that process. So what we do then is that player first, player last is what we're saying is, right, at any point, and we can do this in many interventions in a practice environment, even then when we're doing it in a competition environment, when it comes to the end of the round, when we say review, they've been thinking like this the whole time. So they're going, right, this is what I'm spotting. This is where it is. This is what I've seen. This is what I changed. This is what we did. And they'll connect with the difference between the choice and the execution. So here's the challenge, Alan, with a lot of people is they'll conclude based on outcome. The problem with that is we know there's too many variables. We've got to get them to split choice and execution. It may have been the right choice, your execution. What could you change in that? It may have been wrong choice, great execution, or it may have been right choice, right execution. It didn't come off that time, but it's still the right thing. Be patient, find the opportunity. But actually what you did was great. And the other thing linked into what you said there, Adam, before we get the rule of three is, it's vital for us that we review in balance. So we need to review when they do something exceptional. And not only traditional coaching is we review when they do something unacceptable. So the word of saying review is helpful anyway, because then we're not suggesting they've done something wrong. But here's the problem. Traditional, if I say traditional, I'm just generalizing here because there's a lot of great coaches out there.
Yep.
But traditional coaching is the coach will only ask questions when something's gone wrong or when it could be better. So the problem is now the athlete's going, coach asked me a question. I must have done something wrong. What were we working on? Oh, it's this. So actually it could be a learned answer. We don't know if they've understood. And then our next point is, if they've now given me the right answer, my throwback question has to be is, right, well, when did you recognize that? Why didn't you do anything about it? Because you're telling me the answer, I want you to show me the answer. So here's where we shift it. If we teach from a basic action review process, then all we just go is, okay, review. Now, they don't know now if we're saying they've picked something bad up or they've done something exceptional based on their choice execution. So now we do that when they do things exceptional, the same as when they do them unacceptable. So now they're realizing, oh, so when coach asks me a question, it's not that I've done something wrong and I've got to search for a problem. They're interested in what I saw and the choices I made in my execution. So now the dialogue becomes more qualitative. And also now we're getting them to review things when they do things well. Because here's the thing. The one thing we want to repeat is the things they do well. So why are we spending time going, what did you do there? Review that. And they go, right, really pleased with this. Okay, so what did you do differently than last time that made that so successful? Because we need to repeat that. So what, do you recognize it? Because that's great. So we're starting with the open review. Now they're identifying it. Now we can get stuck in. Whereas often we just get stuck into, okay, so how could you do that better? Or what went wrong there? Or what could you do differently? Well, all those questions are already telling that athlete you've done something wrong. I don't want that. I want to go, let's see what you've spotted. And then let's see if you made any change in the moment, or you're just repeating the same thing and you're waiting for me to give you the answer. I want you to show me the answer. So we're back to that point of early on, we need to develop an environment. We go, there's no fear. And we go, look, I'm not bothered about the outcome at this stage. Where my focus is for you, you're recognizing something isn't working and you're committing to change something, not just continue to do the same thing. That's success for me right there, because we can learn from that. But if you don't do that, all we're doing is we're guaranteeing you'll do something that's not working. There's no development there. So if we can get that across with any athlete, what we're getting them to realize is, okay, so it's not an outcome. It's not, I'll just under pressure, I'll do my safe thing because I'm okay at the safe thing. As opposed to I'll never do this thing because it doesn't come off that often for me. So I'm outcome led. As opposed to the only way I'm going to get better at that is actually see an opportunity and go for it. And I can review that. And coach is actually supporting me for committing to a choice that I'm quantifying. Well, I'm happy. See the difference, those subtleties there. So when the rule of three comes in, it helps players of any sport understand permission and where they stand. So rule of one is simple. We want them to use the action review process themselves and just pursue excellence in a moment. Be the best you can with what you have in the present. We just need to ask them, what does that look like to you? What does that look like when you're packing a bag in the morning? What does that look like when you're having breakfast? What does that look like you turning your phone off an hour before bed and make sure you get into bed or have a good night's sleep so you can refresh? What does it look like to you each part of the day? What does it look like when you do your warm-up? Are you going through emotions, or do you know you're doing this with intent because you want to be the best you can be? So we get them to see what that is, and then that's an attitude. But now what we're saying is it's about making informed choices and committing to them. So now then making informed choices. That's all that process. So the action review process is part of one, being the best you can be. Two is now teammates are seeing that someone isn't, and now they're stepping in to have an effective impact. They're not waiting for coach. So we want to develop people where they only need one, unless it's a team sport. Individual sport, we want that. But the reality is we're humans, and that's not going to happen. So what we want two is I'm now scanning at me, I'm pursuing me, but also I'm scanning my teammates. So the simple version of that is one is be the best you can be. Two is help everyone else be the best they can be. So what does that look like in a warm-up when you see someone walk in and their head is down? Well, if I'm effective at two, pursuing excellence, I'm scanning. Danny's looking a bit different coming in today. His head down. He's not normally down. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to have a little chat. So here's where the skill level comes in. And this is the competency development that many athletes aren't good at all ages, is that too often they don't know how to read people. They don't understand part of their job is to help someone. But also, secondly, is how do I speak different to Danny when Danny's head's down, he's under pressure, compared with how I speak differently to Stevie to have an effective impact. I've got to learn. I've got to be smart in how I impact people under pressure or when their head's down. So I've got to learn that. But the second thing is, part of the rule of two is the 3 A's. So the 3 A's is if someone reaches out to you, even if you don't like the way they say it, you have to internally accept that even if you don't like how they're saying it, they're doing it for the right reasons. Second one, I acknowledge. That's a hand touch or a thumb up. I'm letting them know I've acknowledged it. And third is I act. I change. I act because of what's happened, the 3 A's.
Okay, so could I, sorry to interrupt, Mark. Could I just give that some context and boxing? So what I'm hearing from that is that perhaps my sparring partner, we're sparring, and maybe the round's over, or during. This is what I want to ask you in a moment, though. They've said, okay, you're not doing this, or they've stepped back and said, you're not doing this, or you did something well. The guy then accepts. That could be a touch of the gloves. Let's go about doing it. So you've made that intervention at 2. So that's what it might look like at 2 for boxing.
Okay. Let's use that example, Adam. Let's take it to the next level. So if I share with you where we want them to get to, and then there's steps to get there.
Sure.
Now in that sparring, if that athlete's seeing that the other athlete is not committing or they're being lazy, whatever it is they may be, then it may be you've given them permission to call a timeout if that happens. You might give them that and you go, I'm giving you permission. If you're seeing that your teammates not giving you the challenge, not being the best they can be, someone might go, right, coach, timeout. A timeout, you could set 10 seconds on it or 20 seconds, 30. It's short. So then that athlete goes, Danny, review that for me, review. Doesn't tell Danny in that situation. He's going, Danny, review. Now, if we got the action review first is state, and then scanning, then committing to the choices. So then they go, okay, review that, Danny. How you doing with committing to the choices right there? How you being committing to that shot? How you been at being in the present now? Whatever it may you target that. And Danny goes, yeah, I'm not in it. Okay, so let's reset, Danny. You've got this. So what can you do now? What can you do now to challenge me a bit more? What are you noticing with me? So now we're going, I need you to challenge me, Danny. So what are you seeing now that you can catch me with? So they're using the action review process. What he's doing is using the scanning and the action review. What are you seeing, Danny? What have you seen with me? What can you do different? So now they're having that quick check, okay, and hand touch, right, so what are you going to do, Danny? Player first, player last. So what we're doing is instead of, and this is a real trend, basketball's terrible for it, by the way. When I first introduced this, the coaches are going, oh, yeah, he's a great leader, that guy there, Mark. And I'm watching this player in the timeouts, and the player is doing exactly what the old coach-led coach used to do, is just shouting at the other players. And it's the same players talking, same players being silent. Well, that's useless. So we need to develop what I call ninja mastery. So if we've got those leads of players, and you've got them in every club, it doesn't matter what it is, they're the influential players, and they may be the ones that get frustrated when the others don't work as hard as them. They're highly motivated, they're very vocal. So we need to take them to the side, and this is where the rule of 3 is brilliant. And we say to them, right, okay, so what are you seeing over there? So people may be doing a bit of sparring, someone may be on the heavy bag, light bag, whatever it is. And what we're doing is we're going, I've now spotted, I don't want to step in. So rule of 3 at 3 is coach steps in. I'm going, no, I'm not stepping in. I see one of my influencers and I go, right, what are you seeing over there? And that we've spotted some people are doing some lazy sparring, their heads are just going through the motions, or someone on the bag's not doing what their focus or their work on was. And you go, what can you do over there? Yeah, can I leave that with you? No problem, coach. Leave that with me. And then that person goes over and go, hang on, just review what's success here, guys. What do we need to do? So what do we need to change right now? Bang. Show me 3 A's. So it's all those little things where we're working in. What we want to develop is we want to develop an environment where a player, an athlete of anything can challenge another athlete, but that one, they're doing it for the right reasons. The other athlete is accepting it for the right reasons of the 3 A's. So that's what that 3 A's is huge, because what we find is a lot of peers, or there's a hierarchical scale. I mean, MMA and boxing, it's the same. I'm coming in, I'm the junior guy, or he's a senior guy, you know, his first choice, bigger, stronger, faster. And all of a sudden the junior guy feels he can't go, well, hang on a minute, Danny. So actually we need to break that down and said, look, if we agree on what acceptable and unacceptable is in our behaviors and our cultures here, part of the rule of 3 is anyone can reach out to anyone else to help them be the best they can be. If they see they're unacceptable and they're not self-managing, anyone can do that. And guess what? If someone reaches out to you, you've got to do the 3 A's.
And I like, so what you've mentioned there, I like the way as well that when you're at 2, so you're kind of going up the scale, you might have been in danger of going to 3 where the coach has seen that the other guys aren't pulling someone on it. But instead of then going to 3 and going, right, okay, I'll go and tell him, you've gone back to 2, to one of the boxers, who, like you say, maybe an influential one, has got a bit of a voice and saying, right, what you're seeing over there. So instantly, instead of going to 3 where we're getting coach-led again, we're going back to athlete-led by purely talking to them rather than going straight to the boxer.
Yeah.
And I never really sort of considered it that way. So I think that's very powerful.
Let's go the other level, Adam, as well. Once you develop the base foundation, there's ways we can do this, is we do that with the most junior and silent athlete in the gym. We pull them to the side and go, right, what you're seeing there. Now, it may be a technical thing to build their confidence. So they're going, right, I've noticed that guy's hand's coming down. So great. Next time we have the timeout when they're going sparring, can you review? And then if he doesn't pick it up, can you share with that? Because I totally agree. So then we've got the most junior, quietest athlete going and reviewing one of the senior guys. And he does say, well, this is what I noticed. Once he's asked them to do the review. And then you get that 3 A's again. I mean, what is that? Is a confidence builder and a relation builder for that. Now, what you can do is you can take some of the senior guys and goes, right, one of my focus areas that you're going to help me with is bring up these younger, quieter guys. They haven't got a voice now. They're not as confident as I want them to be. So this next week, I'm going to get them to start reviewing you guys in the gym or picking some observations up. So you might find one of the younger guys going to come to you and ask you for one of them reviews, or you know, make an observation or ask you of something, and just accept it for what it is, that actually they're reaching out. So part of that is actually the fine tuning of that, building that culture, seeking opportunities to see something, go, how can I have a little intervention here, intervention there? And your whole basics of is agreeing what the behaviors of acceptable is in that basic action review. Am I making choices in a moment? Am I committing? Am I pursuing excellence in a moment? Or am I cruising here because I haven't got to fight for another 4 weeks, or it's, you know, early on the season, I can have a play around. Yeah, you can have a play around here, but guess what? If you're having a play around on the warm-up and everyone can still do the warm-up great, fine, have a play around, have the vocal. But here's the thing. If you're having that vocal and you're negatively now impacting on someone else doing that warm-up, then you can't do it. Because then we're actually not being the best we can be and helping everyone else be the best they can be. So this is where it's not the disciplinarian thing of, look, it's A, B, C. This is about, let's agree what it looks like. Let's keep our personalities, but it's up to me to be the best I can be. What does that look like? And then it's up to me to scan, and if someone else is unacceptable, we'll help them be the best they can be.
Sure. And so I'm trying this. I've been trying this for two and a half years now at Dice, and still working my way through it, and trying to, you know, chop and change it where I see fit. One thing that really hits home that I find really powerful about it is that if the boxers do not commit 100% to the choice that they've made, then we don't allow them to feed back to each other. Yeah. We don't allow that review process. So you actually give the review as that is your reward for actually committing 100%. And sometimes when you see them sort of standing going, did you commit? And they're like, not really, I didn't really commit to it. They sort of stand with the tail between the legs a little bit like, oh, I didn't really try it. And the next time the round goes like this, it just flies. Yeah. So you know, why do you feel that's so important as a process?
It's a basic that based on performances, behavior, not on outcome. So the reality is, if everything stems from habits, right? So it's back to that analogy. If we allow the puppy to poo on the carpet, then the puppy's going to keep pooing on the carpet. If we're inconsistent in taking them outside and letting them poo, then having a game, they'll continue. So it's about building behaviors. If we want someone under pressure to be consistently making choices and committing 100% every single time, every moment, irrelevant fatigue and pressure, we cannot allow them to be unacceptable and not committing in a practice environment. So here's the principle. You have to earn the right to review. How do you earn the right to review? You commit to the choices you make. You don't commit to the choices we don't review. It's as simple as that. You don't need to get angry with that. It's, hey, go again. Didn't commit. Okay, let's go. Show me now. And it's as simple as that. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're reviewing nonsense. We're reviewing things that no one committed to. Well, we've got nothing to work on there. And actually what we're saying is then it's okay to not commit, which is the one thing we don't want in any sport. I mean, in contact sports especially, the one thing we want to do is commit to everything they do, whether that's defense or offense. It doesn't matter. We just got to commit to it. Make a choice and commit. Make a choice and commit. And if we can develop an environment, you will not get angry if someone does that, because we can quantify that. We can review that. But if you allow them not to do that, actually you're building that very habits you don't want. And you're part of the problem then, not part of the solution, because you're allowing it.
Mm-hmm. And then your feedback, if you allow it, is just sugar-coated white noise. And what's the point? And they actually don't start believing in your feedback because they know that they didn't commit. So why? Yeah. So one more question just before I bring the guys into the campfire. So sorry, I've been hogging it, guys. You also have an approach before for performance athletes or performance boxers and recreational ones. Because in our gyms, most of us in our gyms have, well, whether it's an issue, 1 minute I've got someone who is preparing for a national championship, and then next minute I've got little Johnny who walks in off the street who's never even seen a boxing glove, and it's how we differentiate their journeys. So how do you go about that?
So let's go the other way with that, Adam. My principle is that we define someone's, if they're a leisure athlete or a performance athlete, by their behaviors, not based on their competency or level of boxing. So an example is I've seen top level international and professional athletes that, in my view, are leisure athletes. They do the stuff they like. They don't commit to the stuff they need to do. They don't get their sleep pattern. They don't do the rehab, the prehab. They don't do the stuff they don't like doing, but they need to do. So for me, they're still leisure. A leisure athlete, for me, is okay if that's what their goal is. So if their goal is, they'll come in, they go, look, I just want to get off the streets and I enjoy doing this, and I'm not going to do anything outside the gym. You can still set the acceptable, unacceptable, and acceptable for, okay, so what would that look like here? Because this is about being the best you can be based on your goal, but also help everyone else be the best they can be. So how can you help others? So that may be just the tidying up the gym. That may be, if you're holding your bag for someone that is performance, make sure you're doing these things to help them. But actually it's then understanding and getting every athlete to understand, look, understand everyone's different, understands everyone they're never at the same ability. They're never at the same goals. We've got a mixed bag. Even the elite sports have a mixed ability bag. But what we can say is everyone can pursue excellence in the moment. So even a leisure athlete in the moment can go, what's the best you can do when you throw that left jab? What does that look like? Well, that's it. You can still do that. Now, someone else throws that left jab, more power, more speed, hand is up. And then the performance athletes are doing all the stuff they can to drive towards a different outcome. So my challenge would be, I'd suggest, and it's only on my experience, you may have different, is when I've scanned many athletes that say they're performance athletes, for me, they're not. They're lazy. They're leisure athletes. They're doing the stuff they need to do, not the stuff they want to do. So we need to define, are we scanning their behaviors? And the performance athlete has to be a 24/7 behaviors. That may be, are you investing in your wellness? Are you investing in your sleep? So I'm not a fan of the work-life balance, but I am a fan of making sure a performance athlete needs to know how to keep their mind in wellness. What are you doing? Are you doing, your little breathing exercises? Have you found what works for you? But then are you doing your nutrition? Are you getting your nutrition in, buying it in bulk if you're under budget? Are you knowing your macros and your micros you need to be successful? Are you setting your food up in the fridge ready for the day before? Are you rushing it? All this stuff for me is performance behaviors. If your performance, so leisure is, don't worry about all that. But when we turn up to the gym, we still commit to the warm-up. We still commit to the sparring because that's you just being the best you can in the moment. So can you see actually the environment, if someone walked in, they wouldn't really notice much difference. There'll be less challenge and less stress for the leisure. But actually when they jabbed they jab to the best they can. When they're punching that bag, they're punching it to the best they can. It's just they wouldn't be doing the other stuff. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Yeah. So all the, well, some people might call them the 1%, I suppose, all the other behaviours that add to the whole, you know, that add a little bit more mass to the snowball rolling down the hill. They're the things that we need to be doing all the time. I think you call it, is it the every time ethos or principle?
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, I've developed a habit where I've never been gifted, whatever that is, with anything apart from endurance stuff. So I've had to work hard. And I think you know athletes now, but all of you now can think of athletes that go, that person hasn't got the natural ability. If it's like wake up and you go pick that up, you look great. But they're here because they work harder than anyone else. And what we want to do is want to go, look, they are working at the level everyone needs to work at. It's not they're working harder. You should be working as hard as this guy. But that guy has realized that's the only option for them to get anywhere. Some of our other athletes kind of cruise because they've still made it. They've still got the team. They've still got selection. But actually, their behaviors are unacceptable. So they're setting their level based on the people around them, not based on their own potential. So for me, that's just underperforming. And we would do them a disservice unless we raise their awareness to that, for them understanding what are the options you've got to be the best you can be. Let's work through what excellence is for you from getting up in the morning and going to bed. You say you want to be world class. If you want to say you want to be the best in Britain, whatever it is, what does that look like if we're saying that? Are you kind of want to be that, or do you want to be that? Well, if you want to be that, let's break it down. Let's look at every element of your day, and you tell me where you say you're world class in behaviors and where you're leisure in behaviors. Because actually it's the behaviors I'm interested in right now. And that's when we start highlighting for a lot of them going, well, actually, no, I'm not every time. And actually, I hardly ever do that. I said, well, okay, well, then you're still a leisure athlete. It's a choice. That's fine. You can be, but don't expect to be the best you can be. Don't expect in this club, you might get first choice now, but there'll be a time in the next 5-10 years when you're going to get knocked out by somebody that is similar ability, but guess what? They are every time athlete. And you're not going to see him for another 5 years. So what are we going to do now to make sure that doesn't happen?
Sure. Thanks for that. I'm just going to move it on and bring everyone in now. So welcome back, guys. Excuse me. So Scott's, I'm going to hand over to Scott now. You were asking about commitment, Scott.
Yeah, I wanted you to elaborate, Mark. By the way, thank you very much. That was very helpful. I was hoping you would elaborate a little bit more on what you meant by commitment, but I think you did that already. So you answered my question after I wrote it down.
Okay. What is my understanding of it? What did you get from it when you?
Well, my thoughts were, you know, does your effort align with your goals? That's what I kind of get from what your perspective of commitment is, you know. And we were speaking about leisure, professional athletes. Athletes have high aspirations. Picking back onto that, I do wonder, you've clearly worked with a bunch of athletes over the years. Do you think some of these traits are like conscientiousness, discipline, that they're somewhat hardwired? I mean, what's your success in turning a really lazy athlete, someone who's, you know, consistently half-assing it, and really turning them around? Have you had a lot of success there, or does it tend to be hardwired?
I'd say it depends on the craft of the coach, but I'd say with the coach, if they're confident in using the principles, they're patient and relentless, and they do the pre-agree stuff, which we might get onto, which is the stuff that sorts it out, is you're going to, I'd say you're 80% plus, you'll see a change in those athletes. But here's the great thing about this, Scott. If you do the pre-chat first of aligning what is it is, so this is your choice. Let's agree what the behaviors are based on the choice you've just said. Now let's rate and baseline your behaviors against what we've just agreed you need to be that. Those other 20 will be the ones that be telling you, well, maybe I don't want it as badly as I thought. I like the idea, but I'm not willing to do the work. So, okay, that's fine. So let's switch you to leisure. No problem. If you change your mind, let us know. But let's not set something up you're not committed to. And what you find with some of them is they'll come back and go, actually, I'm ready now. We had a golf player we did this to in the England golf team, and he was just not committing. So we went through this, and the coaches at the time had the conviction and the courage to do this process. So he then agreed that actually, and he was one of the best in the squad, by the way, so it was a lot of courage to drop him. he had leisure behaviours, and it actually wasn't the role model he should have been, but actually it would have killed him for the next 4 or 5 years. So they dropped him from the team once we went through this process where we're going, right, based on your goal, let's agree the behaviours, and now let's set yours where you are, and sometime, every time, or never. And then he agreed, well, actually, I'm not committed to doing those things to the goal, so maybe I don't want the goal. And I go, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to give your spot to this guy because actually he is every time. It's not your ability yet, but we believe he will be because of his behaviours. And that guy, actually, we spoke to his parents as well because he was 20, living with the parents. We spoke to his parents to explain what we were doing. And they go, yeah, I get this. And what happened with him is he came back the next season and he said, give me an opportunity, I'm ready. And his behaviour shifted. But it took that courage in the pre-chat. I think what happens is sometimes, Scott, we attempt to influence them by us doing all the work and having a little odd chat here and there. And what we don't do that pre-agreement talk about actually what are the every time behaviours we need. Let's baseline them against where you are now. You know, so all we're saying is we recognise the behaviours you need based on the goal you said you want. Okay, now we're recognising your behaviours only get you here, not here. So if this is your goal, then we need to change here, or we just reset your goal. But it won't be this goal with your behaviours, it'll be this one. So which one do you want? We put it back on them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I tend to have the same problem with the same athletes. That there's an enormous disconnect between what they're telling me and what they actually do. Yeah, and I've started to redirect because we have a limited time as coaches. I've started to redirect the kids who perhaps aren't as talented. Perhaps they don't even have the lofty goals, but they're certainly in there working and being the best they can be. They're committed. So,
and that's important, Scott, because what you're doing there is you're developing the very environment and culture that you want, that you will need, that will cultivate the best athletes. And what you'll find is some of the athletes will come back. But what you'll find is when a new athlete comes in, even if they're slightly lazy, they'll see the behaviours of everyone else and they'll switch. Because actually you haven't allowed the puppy to poo on the carpet, basically. But you haven't done it covertly, you've done it overtly. You've asked them, you've shared the principles. There's no surprise. Actually, no, this is let's agree it. Let's agree what it looks like. I think what a lot of coaches do, they want it, they've got the vision in their head, but they haven't shared the vision with the athletes. So you get this frustration and barrier. And the athletes go, I'm doing all right, I'm committing. But and the athlete's thinking, no, you're not. But they haven't had the conversation. They agree the clarity of the differences.
John, over to you, mate. Thanks for that, Scott.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a burning question, and if we'd been around an actual campfire, I'd have probably got a burning ember and thrown it at Adam to stop talking, or to you, Mark. I think
I would have slipped it.
Yeah, probably. Having listened to Mark several times, so I come in with a bit of prior knowledge, and having attempted to put in a similar structure in American football, which is the sport I'm into, which is obviously very, very coach-centric as well. I find myself even now sitting down going, that's really good, that's really good, that's really good. And this isn't just to blow smoke towards you, Mark. But I would recommend any coaches listening to this go back and actually play it really slowly, or almost use an artificial intelligence device to download the text of this conversation and go back and listen to every little bit. There's so many golden nuggets in there. But I think linked to that, I think it's really about, to me, it strikes me as being about coach behaviour as well. And whilst we're talking about the athletes and them executing the rule of three, I think what Scott referred to there with his change in behaviour is really crucial, because athletes and coaches need to kind of acknowledge that it's not going to be the coach who's the sage on the stage. You know, we're going to be the guide on the side. And actually, our behaviour with our leisure athletes, which is kind of where my question will eventually get to, we're treating everybody fairly and equally anyway, you know, because we're just saying review, and then having those smaller side conversations where we dig into detail and facilitate them in rule three. So I think that's brilliant. And I guess my question is, how would you, and I guess I throw this to the other four coaches, the boxing coaches in here, how do you see this system operating when you're in a club and actually have got that leisure athlete coming in, not because of lack of experience, because they might have been in the club 5 or 6 years, but how do you manage them so that they aren't the negative influence on other athletes and other boxers?
That's a good question, and it's the one that constantly does happen. And to be fair, and it's a bit of a shame on me type thing. When I'm with my performance athletes and I'm preparing them, and then suddenly I look down the corridor and I do see someone walking in with their dad or the mum or something like that, and I go, yeah, they've never done it before. Part of me then goes, bugger, I'm split a little bit here because I can't turn the kid away. So it's kind of shame on me because I'm a bit ill prepared for that. So maybe I'm not really going to answer your question particularly well, but I think it starts with a conversation, as to why you're here and how can we help you.
I've got some might help you there, Adam, as a quick fix. It links into yours, John. Have you seen Evo Soccer, Evo Rugby, the videos I've shared? They've been doing it a proper intervention with me. So I've been mentoring them for about 2 years now, just mentoring the coaches, a few examples with the players when they go, Mark, can you show me? So what we've done there is they've set up a whole process where we have parent ninjas, player ninjas, and we have ninja mastery. So what happens is they have a little video online and go, this is a culture. It may not be everyone, but this is it. This is success for us about engaging everyone, mixed ability. And then what we do is when someone says, if you want to come, just let us know when you're coming. So they go, oh, I'm going to come on Tuesday. Yeah, no problem. So what they do then is they've got a database of the parents. So then they'll link up to one of the parents they know is coming on that day. One of the ninja parents go, and they'll share their names and the kid. And they go, we got them coming. Can you win the hearts and minds? So the little session they do with them. So they go, yeah, no problem. So they meet them when they come in. They look for them, new face. Hi, you, Sarah and Jimmy. Yeah, we're such. Oh, come with us. And they share with them, look, this is my kid over there. This is what we've been doing. This is what we've been through and what you notice here. And they help them see. And what we also do as well is we have the ninja kids, where if we've got a new kid coming, they do the buddy up. So we go, Jimmy, we've got a new kid coming. Can you do the hearts and minds? So Jimmy will meet them and go, oh, come with me. My name's Jimmy. Bang. And they give them the experience. So what we're doing then, the coach is still coaching. But actually, we're developing a culture where we're using the parents to influence parents and the kids to influence the kids, because we develop that kind of mastery. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And you're also showing to the kids straight away that, well, if that kid there can teach me and help me, I can be that kid. Very attainable and probably quite quicker than I thought, rather than, oh, my God, that the coach probably wants me to be Muhammad Ali in 2 months' time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very sort of reachable. Ben, over to you, mate.
Cheers, Adam. And hi, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity of listening to your words of wisdom tonight. I've got a couple of questions, but the one I wanted to start with was your rule 2, which is sort of your peer group policing or helping others to become better. I can imagine it working really, really well with a team environment, because we're all selfish by human nature. And if I'm in a team and you're doing well, that's going to help me achieve my goals. I wanted to sort of just quiz your sort of experience, or some of the problems you may have faced or solutions you'd have with more individualized sports. There's a lot of boxers out there who are successful through being very narcissistic in their nature, especially in environments where there is that sort of competition for places and who's the number one spot. So effectively, if I'm helping my peer get better, not only am I going to lose that slot, potential funding, I might get hurt, I might get dropped, as a consequence of it. I can imagine in a boxing club and on a boxing team, we see it in the day-to-day training, in the training environment, the peer group policing, helping each other out. But when it comes to the actual competitive bit, have you come across issues with that, with the sort of narcissism?
So you got 3 key elements to that, and I'd never use the word policing, because that sounds like we're picking on things when they go wrong, as opposed to when someone does something exceptional and then the unacceptable based on behaviours, I'm having a positive impact. But the 3 key elements are there. Remember, our sole goal as a coach of the big picture, the philosophy, should be impact on the human being, to develop interdependent people. that actually when they leave the club or they retire, whatever it is, they're great people. They can manage themselves, their state, their management, but they can deal with conflict, but actually they can work with other people, because that's the reality of life. That's what we need to deal with. And well-being, you know, depression after sport, all these things. Often what sport does is they'll put now these interventions into when someone retires. Well, that's telling me the sport's wrong. Because if we're developing the right people through the sport, they'll have the skills when they retire. So the transition should be much easier. So that's one thing. The second thing is, if it was just on, it's another one of my little words there, Adam, but you need to be both selfish and selfless to be world best. And then it's interpretation of those words. So what I mean by that is selfish. You want to do everything you can to be the one that gets picked. So I'm going to make sure my sleep's good, my nutrition's good, my conditioning is good. I'm going to do that one more rep. I'm going to make sure when I spar, I'm going to find the toughest guy I can spar with that's going to catch me out on my weak area. That's me being selfish. But I need to be selfless as well, because the reality is, if I can get that guy to be better, if I can get those guys more motivated, they're going to give me a greater challenge. They're going to help me improve quicker. They're going to build the environment that's going to help me live the way I need to be the best I can be. Because it's not just about this team, it's about beyond that team. So if we can develop an environment where, because it's the same, you think about it, Ben, it's the same as in even sports like rugby, Premiership Rugby, NBA, you know, all these top teams, they're all practicing. And then the coach each week, so if we look at rugby, for example, and with basketball, it's, you know, they have a rotation so they can play 2-3 times a week. So in rugby, football, these top sports, big money, big pressure, big media, each week, that coach has to bring these players in and go, I'm not picking you today. And then he has the tough where goes, well, I'm better than Jimmy. And if they don't develop the right culture, we're going like, everyone's about being the best you can be. And guess what? I'm not just going to pick based on who has the best ability. Here are all the elements I'm selecting on. So one of the elements is, how is your every time behavior? How is you working on your work on? How are you helping others be the best they can be? How are you pursuing and be the best? So the selfish and selfless part in our culture, these are also massive elements to you getting picked. So what we then do is we cultivate the type process where we go, look, you can say, look, I want to be the one that's picked. Great, love that attitude, but you need to show me that. So what does that look like in your everyday behaviors? And here's the thing, this culture is about helping everyone be the best they can be. So what would that look like when you're sparring against Jimmy? Because the only way you're going to spar against Jimmy is help Jimmy spar against you as best Jimmy can. If Jimmy's lazing against it, that's not going to help you spar. So what do you need to do to help Jimmy be the best he can when he spars against you, to give you some challenge? So now they realize, well, I haven't even thought about it like that before. So, well, that's the type of culture we're building. So if we're every time with that, those people that like come in and might think they've been in environments before where they think, I've just got to look after myself and that's how I'm going to get picked. It's a paradigm shift for them where they think, oh, this is a bit different. And so long as, here's the other thing, Ben, then you need to be 100% honest on your selection. So one of the baseball teams I was working with, a mistake a coach made, the head coach, was he lied to a player because he thought he was being kind to the player of why he didn't pick the player. And then 2 weeks later, the player found out why he didn't pick him. And what do you think happened with that credibility? Out the window. So actually for him attempting to be kind, actually he killed the relationship. So one, we need to be every time with this, but do you see where those subtle differences and the clarity at the beginning really start to change some of those conflicts and barriers that we have with some of the individuals?
Yeah, definitely.
What did you do, Ben? Based on that, Ben, what were the big things you took from me answering that question? What were the things that resonated with you there?
It's that it's the culture you're talking about. So there's a big thing about medals over morals, and I think if you're really clear with the culture you want to create, because I completely agree with you, it's more than just the sport itself. It should be about impact on the person as a whole. So no, I get what you're saying. I meant how do you deal with, because it's a difficult conflict of, you want them to, but you did answer it, sorry, with that selfless and selfish conflict.
Yeah, and don't forget, Ben, it's a love tagline, that thing about, morals over medals, but actually it's sending the wrong message. What we should be saying is actually performance is a behaviour, not an outcome. So if we drive the right behaviors in wellness, that's going to help people be in the right state, manage their state, being able to regulate it, commit 100%, effectively under different pressures, make great choices and commit to them without fear. Those very fundamental principles, making informed choices, will maximize the performance while impacting well-being. So we don't have to compromise. So this is what really frustrates me at the moment. We see, like, you know, the US gymnastics, the real disturbing documentary that came out now, a lot of other athletes, British cycling again within the abuse. And for me, then people react in the post, well, we need to do something about this. Well, my concern is, well, if you had a proper mentoring process, surely you've been seeing this anyway. Have you just been turning a blind eye? Because for me, those coaches aren't great coaches. They're instructors. You know, they're demons. They're not actually developing the person to get the best out of them anyway. So I think there's a balance issue where people think need-centered coaching is what we're sharing here is soft. It's not. It's the toughest way to coach. But you're putting a person first based on need, not based on want. So part of that is wellness. Part of that is that rule of three. Part of it is selfish and selfless. Part of that is pursuing excellence in every moment and defining whether your performance and leisure. And then the big thing which Adam linked back to and John did is to do that, we need to be aware of our own state as coaches. Are we managing our wellness? Are we managing how the decisions we make and how we scan when we've had a nightmare knackered day and now I'm coming in for a practice session at 6 p.m. and I just haven't made promotion if you're in the military, Ben, or, you know, my wife's just, you know, had an affair, or my dog's just died, wherever it may be, you know, or not as extreme. And now I'm going into that session and it's the 1,000th session I've done. And what I could be thinking of, but it's the first for these guys. So what is the ideal state for me to have the biggest impact in this moment for these guys that have turned up in this practice session? And this is the missing skill, in my view, within player development, is actually coach development in those principles that we've just discussed.
And I guess ultimately the culture is a combined cumulative effect of all the behaviors. So I don't personally like when people refer to culture, because culture means nothing. It's just a tenuous abstract thing.
It's an abused word, isn't it? Yeah.
Engaging in is the key thing, you know. And it's I've stolen this from you. It's the don't tell me, show me, and it's what you do is actually what we're judging our success on.
Yeah.
Linking on to that, you know, the don't tell me, show me thing. I know, Mark, you talk a lot about you know, scanning for like recall. So, for example, they've had a session on a Friday, they come back on Monday, and then you're putting in, you might get them the boxes to, I don't know, shadow box with a certain skill that they're looking to, and you're, rather than saying, right, remember what we did on Friday, let's see you do it, you actually want to see if they are actually recalling it themselves. Why is that why is that a powerful tool?
Yeah, so I call them covert recalls. So that's the only thing that's covert. So what we're saying there is we will never know if a practice session in the moment was successful. We'll only know in the next session or in 2-3 weeks later, because everything we're doing there is short-term recall. So if you think about it, if you worked on a boxing skill and you're going, right, we're working on keeping a guard up, whatever it may be, and in that moment when you're reviewing it, and even when you're going into sparring, that guy's guard is a lot better than it was, and you're going, great, fantastic success, but it's not success because it's short-term recall. You've just been telling him and discussing it. It's not real. So you can even put him in a different spar, but that would still be in the head. So if you do a covert recall, what we're saying is we don't remind them, we just put them in an open situation and we're scanning for how's the recall been? What has been transferred? What has stayed? I'm going to up the pressure. What's still there? What's regressed? If we're seeing now there's no recall, that's telling us that session was not successful. So then we can ask ourselves, why was it? Now, here's the common ones. They didn't see the value in what we were doing, so therefore they weren't connected to it. We were giving them the answers too much, so we weren't saying review. We were giving them all the feedback. Yeah, that was really good, and don't forget to do this, blah, 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 and they just switched off. Or we're doing too many things. So we're covering so much for variety and enjoyment or fun, whatever it is, but actually we're not spending enough on things so they can understand it. We're not getting them to self-review it. So actually they're not learning with understanding in a way that embeds in some shift. So that's again, our analysis back to what we were talking there before, Ben, is the covert recall is our check as much as theirs. So we're saying, how good was my coaching then? Well, let's see how much has been retained. Okay, well, great. That was a good session. What did I do differently there? Because that's given me audit. Or no, it wasn't effective. What did I do that wasn't effective? What do I need to change? So then we're back on the principle we can call them in. There's lots of interventions, but we need to get to the point is, guys, we're ready when we're ready. We are when we are. We can't move on yet because we haven't nailed this. So what do we need to do now to be successful? So so now we're getting the athletes to go, oh, wow. So it's not just what we're going to do today, coach. It's not just another session. There's success in every session. And it may be your own work on, but actually there's meaning. There's a link to what we're doing here. And we may not see an improvement straight away. It may take months. But actually, we still need the recall with understanding for it to grow. And I think a lot of coaches, again, we just design sessions, but we design them independently, not interdependently. So there's no flow, and we're not checking how effective was that last session. So you can actually audit that. With the pros that I work with the coaches, they have a Excel and some have crazy software stuff I know nothing about, but they'll have a covert recall check. So basically, they audit it with different stress levels, and they put them in at any time in practice. And what they're doing is a covert, and they're checking and giving a tick and notes. So that's building a confidence that in a competition under pressure, the recall and competence have been there, that they're more likely for their behavior to change in competition. So it's a really good audit tool. Is that too longer answer, Adam, for your?
No, not at all. I mean, John's just put up there, he's mentioned about spacing, you know, and the ability to actually retrieve information, you know, from short-term store into long-term, the more you do that. John, do you want to sort of go over that a little bit more? Just emphasize.
Yeah, again, I think I think there's all of these little rabbit holes that we can dive down, but it's good teaching practice. It's good teaching science. It's good teaching research, evidence in teaching, which obviously we always compare coaching and teaching to be the same things, and they're not. I think they're different. You know, good teachers will talk about or will plan for spacing, so they'll deliver stuff over a season, and they're obviously periodized. They'll also plan for interleaving, so they'll work on one concept, go away, come back and work on it again, go away, come back on it again. And I think crucially, you know, because success and excellence is about behavior, and that's our performance that we're judging. It's can the athlete retrieve that from their, let's say, their long-term memory, from their previous experiences. And that's the check of how successful you've been. I think, again, you know, I think both in boxing and in other sports, we come away from a session going, that was a great session because everything I did tonight was really good. The true test is, can you replicate those choices and behaviors and actions correctly at the right time in 6 months' time, or in that major competition not when you want to, but when you need to.
And that's back to Johnny's linking in it, particularly for martial arts and all the other type impact contact sports, is we don't want them to have to consciously think about a choice and go, what shall I do here? Because they'll get hit. So we want to be going, actually, is it changing their behavior based on what they're seeing in front of them, how the choices they're making, their commitment to them in the moment. So we can diversify the pressure loading on that, but we've still got to be looking for it as our trends. Are we seeing any shifts here? Because otherwise we're just going, what, another great session? I go, great session. What was great about it? Because we haven't changed from 4 weeks ago. So we've got to now be questioning, how are we measuring success based on the behaviors? Are they shifting? But also then is the behaviors in choice and execution. And that's why we need to separate choice from execution, right? Because they now start making different choices than they've made before, which is great because it's a better choice, but they can't yet execute it at the skill level they could their go-to choice. But with time and practice, that skill will improve until then under pressure, it's become as smooth as their old skill. So under pressure, they're not easily read. They don't keep going back to their old option. They now have a different option. And that's the patience and relentless linked in with the covert recall.
And I guess, as well, I guess that's the balance to try to strike that, as Adam's admitted, you know, we get wrong more than we get right, perhaps, and we just need to persist with this method where we're trying to balance the athletes come into our session and enjoying it, whatever that means for them personally, combined with them going away feeling a bit frustrated. You know, I know from my own personal experience, and I think I'm wired. We're all wired differently, but I'm wired. Probably Adam would and Ivan would. I'm very special. I'm special. In not that kind of way, but you know that I actually quite like coming away from a session being frustrated, and the players and coaches around me have learned that actually me being frustrated is not a bad thing, and I don't need cheering up, and I don't need consoling because I'm frustrated. It's just I've got something I now need to go and work on, and I'll come back next week And ultimately, when it comes to game time, competition time, I'm going to execute because of that frustration and will have fixed my own problem, you know. So I'm working at stage one.
Talking of frustration, John, Scott, do you see in MMA, do you see this kind of thing where you're at a competition and there's a couple of coaches sort of standing watching about, or what you call them, fights, whatever? Do you see that kind of conversation where they're going, bloody hell, why has he not been able to do this? I taught him that on Friday. We've been doing that for a month. Is that something that, you know, you see quite often in your sport?
Yeah, I see it all the time. And I guess even worse, I see them rehearsing and practicing things in the locker room 5 minutes before the fight and expecting that to manifest in real time. You mentioned something about block practice there. I think that's one of the I consider MMA to be a kind of collective of all different traditions and cultures and understandings. But I think we spend way too much time in this block space. We've spoken about them. It's very inauthentic, but it's very seductive because it leads to nice performance. It leads to a lot of validation, or not so much validation. It leads to a lot of good performance in practice. And then, like you said, it just doesn't appear to manifest in competition. So we try and stay on the sloppy, chaotic, messy side of things as much as possible. But that can be a very frustrating process for most of the students.
I think what you'll have, Scott, is that I totally agree. And that's where I think some people get a bit too extreme to one side and the other. There's definitely flow and balance, because you've got to begin with the end in mind. It's a flowing, dynamic, interactive sport, isn't it? It's not one thing separate to the other. But that action review process, if you use that, that's really going to help take a lot of the frustration out, because then they're not looking at outcome. We're based on, okay, so what did you see, feel, whatever it is, whatever language you want. Okay, so what were the choices? Okay, did you commit? So we're realizing that it's not about whether it came off or not. It's about, in that moment, what was your choice? In reflection, in those little things. So you could pinpoint a 10-second period and go, what happens there? So someone just turned them on their back. Okay, so what were your options there? So when they, you know, when some people, they get really frustrated and because they didn't get the success and go, oh, it was just shit, or now they're emotionally led, then you can take them back and go, okay, so what did you see and feel? You're on your back, what did you see and feel? So what were your options? So you get them to reflect post, because they're not doing that. And you go, okay, so what did you commit to? Well, I kind of tried that. Did you commit to it? Did you feel it? You know, so then we're getting them back to, actually, no, I'm not back in what we practiced. I'm just getting caught up and it didn't work, but I'm not giving it time to perfect that skill. I just want it to come off, and it doesn't come off, it doesn't work. So we need to break away from the outcome and reviewing the choice execution. And let's talk about that. Because it may be great choice. Let's just look at part of the execution there. Or it may be the other way around. So it's a really good way to help the athlete take away some of this frustration if they're outcome level.
Mark, just moving on to sort of motivation side of things. One of the things I've looked at your revamped website. Yeah, revamped, like it very much better. And you know, one of the points you mentioned on there is that, well, in this case, a boxer always relies on the coach for motivation, or we create an environment where the boxer is relying on the coach for motivation. Picture a boxing gym. You could play boxing coach bingo, and you're going to hear words like hands up, last 10, push it, lead off, be first. All these kind of very empty things that don't have a behavioural change. So why may we need to look at the coach being stop the coach being the motivator?
Well, there's a few things there. Is one thing, we could spend an hour breaking down motivation and why that's been totally abused as a word and lack of understanding. So it's understanding the difference between motivation and discipline, and it's understanding the difference between motivation, discipline, and cultural behaviours. So, you know, there's whole dynamics in that. But if we went back down to we may build into some of them, but we look at it simplistically. We've got to agree with the coaches. What's success for a coach? Well, for me, success is a coach. The coach makes themselves redundant. An athlete, in the moment, under any type of pressure, has in the right state, can make the right choice, commit to it, and evaluate and adapt live based on what's in front of them without the need for the coach. That should be our success as a coach. Now, I don't know any coach that's ever disagreed with me there. So what we're saying, okay, so let's look at our behaviors in practice that's going to help that. So one thing we don't want is what I call rubbernecking, where we don't want the athlete waiting for coach to verbalize even in live practice of what they're doing right, what they need to change. There's two things with that is what that doesn't align to our success criteria. And secondly is, do they really hear us anyway? And then thirdly, would they have worked it out? Did we give them a chance to work it out themselves before we stepped in? So if someone's hand's coming down and we go, come on, get your left up. Well, a second time, they may have worked it out themselves and got slapped around the head and went, I need to get my hand up. So it's, why are we doing it? And my view is we may be doing it for two reasons. We're doing it because we feel that's part of a coach and we're helping them, we want to help them. Or that's the way it's always been done. And that's what happened to me when I was a boxer. So therefore, that's the way to do it. And so long as we can align ourselves, if our aim is to make ourselves redundant, what does that look like in this practice? What does that look like here? So in early learning, I quite agree. There may be times when you're just going to go, okay, just reach around a bit more there, Danny. Just grab. So it's like MMA or judo where, want that hold on the grip. Just reach because it's early learning. But once they got that, there's no way I should be saying move that grip. I should be stepping back and just watching and see if they're figuring out. Then afterwards I can go to review. I could then take the opposition aside and go, right, can you do this for me? Let's see how he copes and then push him back in. So I'm manipulating the opposition to see how they react. But I shouldn't be vocalizing there because then I'm defeating the whole point of them being able to work it out for themselves, which is what my success criteria is. So I'm a bit of a conflict to my own goal if I do that.
Just go on, Scott.
Oh yeah, and I'm not sure I'm using this term completely accurately, Mark, but we've only been open a year, and actually I'm getting tremendous success and buy-in from new students. They've come into our system, they've come into our environment, and they're completely bought in. Where the challenge lies is when we have more experienced students, which we're also trying to attract, and it's almost like a learned helplessness. They're looking to the coach for everything, and it's very, very difficult to break that. In fact, we've had a couple of they think it's too chaotic, or we're just not giving them the answers. You can see they're almost every time they do something correct or incorrect, they're looking over us for validation or support. And I'm wondering if you can, how do you break that?
Yeah,
how do you break that cycle?
Yeah, so basically, especially when I work with the pro teams or the senior teams, that's what we have straight away. The coach is wanting to change, and actually there's a lot of athletes that come in each season, and actually they're waiting for the coach to tell them all the stuff, and they can't cope. So what I always do is, if you're starting with a new team or we got new people coming in, they go through like an induction, but it's not an induction as we know it. So imagine if you're doing it with a fresh organization, you want to change the culture. You ask them what I use the lighthouse, so you can use anything, but the lighthouse, I use the lighthouse because, okay, what is it we're working towards? The lighthouse is something that never moves, it's static, but everyone can reference on, helps ships, it's there. So if I was to ask you in a fight, so if we looked at MMA, the scenario would be if I asked you in a fight and I came to watch you fight and you were the best in the world, with you being there, what would I see him feel in that octagon? What would it be? Can you explain it to me? And I want them to connect to, right, well, I'm confident going in, I'm managing my state well, I'm in flow, I'm committing to every choice, I'm adapting based on the situation, I'm being smart, I'm being present, I'm there, I'm relentless, I'm patient, based on all the skills I've got. Okay, great. I totally agree. You haven't mentioned coach there. So are you saying you want to be able to do that without relying on a coach to tell you what to do in a moment? Yeah, that would be, okay, brilliant. I totally agree. So that's our lighthouse. And you put as much detail as you want, specific to your sport. Right, so now we both know the lighthouse. What does practice need to be? What do you need to do differently in practice? And importantly, as a coach, what do I need to do differently in practice if that's our lighthouse? So now we can get them to tell us, well, you can't keep reminding us of what to do in a practice. We need to work that out for ourselves because that's aligned to the lighthouse. Okay, so what could I do? So then you can introduce the action review. So, okay, well, let's go. During, I won't give you any feedback. It's about you working it out. And then afterwards, then I'll ask you to review, and I'm interested in your opinion first. And then I may add stuff for you. And we'll do it when you do something exceptionally well, not just when you do unacceptable. So we can connect to the stuff you're doing well, how to repeat them. what do you think about that? I've never met an athlete that has been in the old environment that's gone, oh no, I don't want that. They all go, I get that. So what you're doing is you're pre-agreeing the lighthouse competition, the dream, and then we're going, okay, what does it look like now in practice? Agree the specifics, and then bring it alive. So what we don't get them is coming in. It's a bit like, Scott, I'll give you a basketball example. One of the clubs many years ago I started to work with, and what they didn't do, as I asked them to do, is get the parents in and share with the parents that this was the new way of what we're doing, and this is a value, how it's going to develop your child as a person, decision maker, help them in school, you know, in life and relationships and business. They didn't do that. So they shortcutted that. So what happened was they started to change practice. Then the parents had like a revolt. Some of them walking out, some of them go, I'm not bringing my kid here again. What do you think you're doing? Just stood there doing nothing. I want you to be running up and down, shouting, be passionate. Now the coach wasn't. The coach was actually managing their state and doing these processes. So what we've got to do is, look, if we recognize what we're doing is something that they may not have experienced or understand what's happening and the value of it, we make sure everyone moves in, we do that little chat with them. And when we get great at it, we can get the other athletes to do that when someone comes in. So they go, this is what it's about here. And then you put that on your website. You put that on the intro before they turn up. This is why we do these things. The beauty of that is, Scotty, is one, it helps us. But secondly, even if it goes, oh, Scotty's getting a lot of clients and people come in, what is he doing? They'll read your website. They won't be able to replicate it because they won't understand how to. They'll try, and they might end up just standing doing nothing, and then everyone walks out because they haven't got the light and shade. So for me, every single time that challenge you've shared has occurred, putting that intervention in has prevented it every single time.
I have got there a couple of times with certain of our students, and it's just beautiful when they have that little, we call them these little aha moments.
Yeah.
And they discover them themselves, and then the buy-in starts to come. So
would you say, Scott, you could be cleaner at the beginning, though, of sharing that, like the lighthouse and the connection and why?
Absolutely, I could be better at that. Yeah, I will be better at that.
That's the one.
Yeah. John?
Cool, that's great. Yeah, and I think having seen that in action in basketball England, I think that those are the key things. Declare it up front, and I think, you know, nice link to COVID because we're in the pandemic still. You know, it is about continuing to be adaptable, and we don't know what's going to happen, and explaining to everyone on the journey, we're on this journey together, and I don't know how I'm going to feel as a coach. I don't know how you're going to feel as players, but let's just embrace it and talk about it and discuss it. So yeah, I think my question, because we've talked about reviews quite a bit, and I think Mark, to use your terminology, you've talked a lot about hot reviews in the moment. How would you describe and explain to everybody how we in boxing would use cold reviews? Yeah,
so we do the hot reviews and cold reviews. I do with the coaches as much as the athletes. So if I use the coach process, then I'll challenge you to see how you make the connection back to the athletes. If you think about a hot review, and there's many variables of the hot review, but the simple thing is a hot review, it's in the heat of the moment. It's live. You're in the emotional state you're in. So if we look at it for the coach, what I get coaches to do, I set up with all my clients. Funny enough, I counted it up the other day, and I've got 600 live at the moment doing this in different groups around the world, and they're self-managing now. So what I do is I set up WhatsApp or Slack groups where I have those coaches in, and after a competition and after practice, immediately while their athlete's cooling down, they just press record, and in the WhatsApp, in their coach support group, they do a hot review. And the hot review is self, how was my state? How are my interventions? How effective were they? How was the athlete and other coaches? And it's just a process they go through. And that just gets sent straight away. So if it's if there's senior and junior, we would get the junior coach to go first. With basketball or football, hockey, they just go to the corners and they do it all together and it drops in. So the aim is not to listen to some other coaches before you do yours, just go live. And then I listen to them, the other coaches listen to them. And that's like the emotion, the rawness of the data they've captured and their influence filter of their emotion, how they're feeling. The cold review is, the perfect cold review is, you've recorded the session, you've seen the fight or whatever it may be, or the practice session, and then you watch that back. And it's from your end. So if I've seen guys doing the mobile phones now with the Bluetooth, so they've just got a mic on, they can hear themselves as a coach. And obviously if you're allowed to film brilliant. And so they listen to that back, and then after they've listened, which is referencing, so now they go, hot review in emotions, I thought it was this. I'm now listening back when I'm calm. This is my baselining right here. And then they do a review exactly the same. I've now listened back. Now, how was my state? How are my judgment and interventions? How effective were they? How are the athletes? How are the other coaches? Now, the brilliant thing with that is it's allowing the referencing. So what you'll find is very quickly, coaches will pick things up they haven't in their hot review, which will influence them positively the next time they're in practice or in game. They'll also spot trends. So when they spot trends, the coach can develop and go, okay, for me, my one big work on is this. And they share that with everyone. They share it with the players, by the way, the athletes. Guys, my work on in competition is this. My work on in practice is this, if it's different. And then what happens is after practice, this is where you get the right culture. The athletes review themselves based on the pre-agreed behaviours, and then they review coach. Now, that may be alien to so many people, but the reality is if you've got the wrong culture, they won't do it. They'll just tell you what you want to hear, go, yeah, you're a really good coach, or someone may be cheeky at you. When you develop the honesty, what you'll get is them going, because you've shared the work, and go, right, coach, thought you were really good on your step in here. I think, you know, there was a couple of times when you kind of, your questions were giving me the answer, and you didn't, or you stepped in a bit quickly. I think you're giving us a bit more time. That is the time witness that we want from the athletes, because we know we're on the journey together. But initially, it's just the hot reviews are in the moment. So we're same with the athletes, review, bang, 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 working through the action review process. Then that's in the moment. And the cold review for the athletes can be is, okay, afterwards, 2 hours later, the next day, okay, just review that practice session, and importantly, the matches. If they can record in the matches and watch it back, okay, review. Remember, we've got to separate between the technical and tactical and their awareness of their state, the choices they made. So if I can give you a rugby example, when we took Bath Rugby to the Premiership final that season, those 2 seasons, all we did, we worked on the behaviours. So when we reviewed a match, the coach reviewed the matches, but they didn't share anything with the athletes. They said with each player, right, you group, you're doing this, you're doing this. They reviewed the match. They stood up for the review. They share with the other players, okay, guys, this is what we saw. But they didn't do it on results. They didn't do it on scoreline. They did it on, okay, this is where we were. This is what we saw. This was the option we went for. This is what we missed. Or actually, this is what we should have gone for. This is why we went for this. Everything was based on what they saw and the choices they made and their commitment to it. And they went through the whole game like this. What it did, it highlighted when there were unacceptable behaviours. They weren't present, they were following the ball, or actually they were just going for the same old choice under pressure. They weren't scanning. They weren't seeing the other option. They didn't see it, that's why they didn't go for it. So imagine now the coaches at the back now just listening and ticking because they've done it all. And if there's anything grey, then they go, Danny, can you just talk to me about what happened over there? Can you talk to me about that scrum again? So now they're asking for a bit more detail. So you relate that to boxing or MMA. Now what we're doing is we're saying, right, hot review. Now we're doing cold review. Now you've seen that fight. Okay, over to you. So now instead of them listening to coach, they're going, right, state was good here. This is what I was seeing. This is what I was doing. That didn't see that at the time. Didn't see he was changing his movement or putting me under a bit more pressure. Now I'm recognizing that would have been a better option for me. And you've done it as well, but you're just listening through. And now you're seeing where the differences are, but you're also seeing what they picked up differently at the time when you're in between rounds and you're going, okay, review. And now in the cold review, they're saying things they never said in the ring. So now there's a connection of how you can develop that in practice because they're real spots right there. So that's where the power of the hot and cold review, but it's always player first, player last. It's never you going, okay, what do you think? And then them giving you some general and then go, yeah, let's just look at this. Do you think you could have done this there, and then nodding at you? That's useless in my opinion because they can switch off. So can you see those subtle differences?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so Mark, let's have a look. 1.5 hours, and it probably could be 10 hours, I'm sure. Yeah. So I'm mindful of your time and everyone else's time. So there's been some absolute gems thrown around all over the place today, and I'm sure we're going to, everyone that's watching this back will be picking those.
Can I do a question to each of you?
Feel free, mate. That's the vibe. Go ahead.
If we just went...
Mark, Mark,
Yes.
I'm sorry. This should be quick. You've mentioned state several times
Yeah.
today. I just wanted clarification. Are you talking about the state of arousal or the state of engagement?
It's the state, it's the emotional state of, for them is, are they upset, angry, apprehensive? Are they still in the past where they've just been hit and they're not in the present? So it's identifying each athlete, you'll know, and they may not know what's their ideal state in a match, which may be slightly different for them, but they have to be present. They have to be thinking live, bang, bang. They can't be thinking, oh, I'm losing now, I'm getting tired. They're looking strong. So now their brain is not where it needs to be based on scanning, options, committing, bang, 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 being present. So that when I talk about state, it's finding what is that ideal state for that fighter and what does it look like. But it's based on being present.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess you mean at all stages, whether it be in practice, whether it be in the game. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you may have, there's a different state in different scenarios. So in a match,
Right.
you know, in certain things, or like for you, I don't know MMA, I'm making it up, Scott, but when you're on your back, you may have to really constantly be more relaxed. I don't know. And then in certain situations, right, for me, it's here in warm up, in practicing on certain skill, your state is different. But what is your best state to get the best out of you now? But all of them, you need to be present. So where is your brain now? What are you thinking now that's going to help you be effective? As opposed to, oh, I'm losing now, I'm getting tired. Oh, he's doing, you know, that your brain is now getting filled instead of what does your brain need to be filled with now? Where do you need to be thinking? Where do you need to be feeling, etc.
Okay. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much on behalf of Adam and myself for coming on. That's really good, Mark. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys.
And there's certainly a few T-shirts in there, you know, ninja this and things like that. I think you should get on that one, definitely.
This is the PDS way with with the Markalorian.
Yeah, he had to get Star Wars in somehow.
I was saying it before that was, by the way. I'll just throw that in there.
So, right, finally, and I'm sure it will be finally this time, guys. Mark, if people want to get hold of you, how can they do so?
Twitter's PDS Coach, Papa Delta Sierra Coach, and my website is pdscoach.com. So if you go on the website, it can link to the Twitter anyway, but there's about 25 podcasts on there now. There's some examples of me doing lead speaking, but also there's some clips to YouTube link there, which shows this live. One of them is me explaining the Lighthouse, but you'll see the Rule of Three live. You'll see Hot 1-to-1s live. So there's real world examples. And I've deliberately put the ones on that are with 9, 10, 12-year-old kids to show how impactful and effective it can be, as opposed to showing someone who's a talented athlete. So there's tons there, but also all my services on my online support, team support, organization, coach support, and on the live stuff. So yeah, it's all through that website basically, guys.
Fantastic. Mark, thanks very much again and take care.
Thanks,
guys.
See you later, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Mark.
Thanks for joining us today on The Box Gathering. We welcome the global boxing community to connect and share together in order to grow participation, engagement and performance in all our boxers. Join the discussion on social media or visit theboxgathering.co.uk for more interviews, skills videos, literature reviews, bout analysis and more. The Box Gathering, in partnership with England Boxing. Connect, share, grow.